Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody. The original Audi R8. It's one of those cars I think we can all comfortably call a modern classic. This was an icon the moment it landed. And not just for the fact that it was its maker's first ever supercar, but also because Iron Man drove one. And it also happened to be a darn good car. And I will admit that it is a car that took me a very, very long time to truly understand, appreciate, and to then finally properly enjoy. But I am happy to say that today I rate the R8 as one of my greatest cars that I've never owned. However, it's not a car without its flaws, and in view of the fact that, believe it or not, this is about to celebrate its 20th birthday next year, I think it's about time to talk about whether now might be the right time for you to buy yourself an example of the original V8 Audi R8. I suspect there is very little chance of you clicking on this video without knowing at least a bit about the R8. But before I talk about why you might or might not want to actually buy one, let's remind ourselves about the model, specifically the R8 as it landed in 2006, which then was equipped only with this 4.2 litre naturally aspirated V8. And I think today that engine is often overlooked, sometimes almost forgotten, because you say R8 to people and they'll instantly think of the V10, which is a fantastic engine, a screaming 5.2 litre masterpiece as seen in the second iteration of the Lamborghini Gallardo, the car which provided the platform for the R8. Now the two are not identical. I and others have done videos explaining the differences, but let's be honest here, I don't think anybody has ever shied away from telling somebody that their Audi is in fact a Lamborghini underneath, didn't you know? But that engine. Before this, Audi's performance cars were always mighty things, but almost always with turbocharged power plants. They gave you mid-range punch and often impressive power figures, but they aren't what you'd call sports car engines. This then changed for the B7 RS4, which got an all-new 4.2 litre naturally aspirated engine, which you could argue is an evolution of the one that's seen in the S4, but in reality was a very radically different thing indeed. And it revved all the way to 8,250 RPM, a number hitherto unseen in sporty Audis. It made 420 horsepower and did so without forced induction. And at the time, everybody was a bit surprised about that, because it was a real departure for your classic fast Audi. However, looking back now, you can see it's obvious that was a dry run for this, which got almost the same engine, the key difference being that here it's dry sumped. And something which maybe wasn't quite so unusual for the time, but today is an utter delight, it's also attached to a 6-speed manual gearbox. And in these early cars you could also get what Audi called R-tronic, their version of the single clutch automated manual. But truth be told, if you can drive a manual, this is the only gearbox you want in an R8, because it's fantastic. And though I have my fair share of issues with this car, and I will get onto them shortly, this engine and this gearbox, nah, I'll not have a bad word said about them. And sure, today, 420 horsepower, 317 pounds-feet, that's the kind of number you'd expect out of a hot hatch. You know what? It lets this car perfectly straddle the line between supercar and sports car. And I know there were always those that felt like this generation of car, particularly with the V8 in, just wasn't worthy of the title supercar, but honestly, they're wrong. You sit low down. The proportions of the thing are classic supercar. It's wide, it's squat. Beautiful, this. I didn't realise it for a long time. I initially thought it was just a little bit too soft, a little bit plain. But no, in the flesh, it's got the perfect blend of soft lines and sharp ones. This has stood the test of time incredibly well. That overall lack of pace only serves to make what performance it has all that more accessible and enjoyable. This thing rushes towards the red line, and it's got to be one of the most free revving engines I have ever experienced. Almost to a fault, because it does make on occasion low speed maneuvering a little bit tricky. You just tap the throttle and the thing will spin up instantly to just over 3,000 RPM. The gearbox too, with its gated shifter, might look a little bit like one you'd find in a Ferrari, but in truth, it's a very different affair. It's light, it's positive, got a beautifully judged throw, and it's the sort of thing that makes you want to just find an excuse to change gear. I'll have fourth now. No, fifth. No, fourth was better. What about third? You could spend all day doing that and not get bored. However, you could argue, I think successfully, that Audi may be focused a little bit too much on making this an everyday usable proposition. They maybe went a little bit too much out of their way to make it very much an Audi. Now, in some ways, that's a very good thing. You've got a nice infotainment system over here, which is showing its age, but because it is shared with many other Audi products, can now be upgraded in one of many, many different ways. The layout of the interior is nice, simple, and very easy, certainly far more intuitive than its sister, the Gallardo. The analog dials now, though yes, more or less classic Audi, they're beautiful, they're simple, and they give you everything you need to know. The car also has cruise control, which I appreciate, because a Ferrari of the era certainly would not. The storage space has always been on the pathetic side. The fruit here gives you just about enough for one airline carry-on, and then behind you, you've got a little bit of space on a shelf, provided you get the coupe. Get a convertible, and that's gone. Naturally, if you are thinking about picking yourself up a near 20-year-old supercar, you'll want to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including previous accident damage, mileage discrepancies, outstanding finance, involvement in fire, theft, and to get all of that, you need only 60 seconds and either a registration number or a VIN. Best of all, for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code, JayEmm. And I've always suspected that if you were the sort of person that up until now had been daily driving, let's say, an old A5, you could easily get in this, I think, and be a little bit underwhelmed. Without the optional carbon fibre and the extended leather, this can feel a little bit plain, if, to be honest, reasonably high quality, and again, a little bit more modern and fairly well thought through compared to your supercar competition. And I will also go on the defensive for the seats, which if I were to have an R8, I'd say aren't the ones that I'd want. Instead, I'd want the wingback ones, as you very often see in RS4s, but nearly never see in an R8. Truth is though, these are brilliant. If you want them, they've got heating, they are also electric with plenty of adjustment, though not memory, and they are both comfortable but also very nice and supportive too. Fuel economy is not exactly stellar, though if you are looking at buying a near 20-year-old supercar, are you surprised? On a run, being very sensible, you might get mid-20s out of this, but as an average, I've achieved about 22. Which is not great, but also, to give you some context, when I had my old E46 M3, that averaged about 23.5. And reasons for that figure not maybe being quite as impressive as some would like include the standard fit Quattro all-wheel drive, here a Torsen system with a very heavy rear bias, by default 85% of the torque being sent to the back wheels. And in spite of it being a near all aluminium construction, the car isn't very light. These weigh in at some 1,620 kilos. Your Ferrari of the day, which would have been first an F430, would weigh in at well over 100 kilos less. However, today, though these aren't as cheap as they were a few years ago, you can now pick one up from £25,000. And you certainly can't say that of an F430. In fact, you can't say that of a 360. The only one that did change hands for that much money was Auto Alex's. And I'm sure he'd agree, that was not a good purchase.
He's not wrong there, you know.
And the R8 instead has acquired a reputation for being the sensible, everyday supercar that you can run on a reasonable budget. After all, it's basically a two-door RS4. Is that true? Well, not quite. Now, before I get onto that, I want to talk to you about some of the other things that I think this car doesn't do so well. The steering. I know many praise it, but I've always felt like in this early car, it's just not as good as I'd like it to be. There is a little bit of feel, there is a little bit of something going on, but when you get into a bend, it just doesn't talk to you as I would like it to. Fortunately, the rest of the chassis does, so it's ultimately not much of a problem. However, for me, it is something that disappoints. Not so much though as the suspension. This car has the mag-ride dampers, which when new were not a particularly expensive option, and very quickly became seen as a must-have. 10-15 years ago, if you wanted to sell one of these and it didn't have mag-ride, good luck. Today, people don't want it, and that's because the mag-ride is known to fail, and when it does, it's expensive. Now, there have been a number of buyer's guides for the R8 over the years, but most recently, RE Performance, the lovely Ricky, did one. And in that, he said that the dampers used to be £800 a corner, already pricey. Now, they're about £1,600. That hurts. And I've got to say, assuming these ones are in good working condition, they're not very good. You probably noticed both me and the camera being shaken about quite a bit in this video. This car, it's just not that well settled. It lumps and bumps down the road, and that's when you believe that it's related to the Gallardo, because that was also a fairly ill-mannered car. Now, halfway through the R8's production run, they did change the suspension. When the V10 came in, they revised it. And today, if you need bits for the V8 suspension, bushes and the like, you can't get them. Instead, what you've got to do is upgrade to the V10 setup. And that's not cheap. Last time I checked, that was a £6,000 job. But happily, because these were made in relatively high numbers, for a supercar anyway, near 30,000 of the Gen 1 R8 having been built, you've got options. What's more disappointing, and remember, this is the original press car, this is owned by Audi, is the number of creaks and rattles in here. Every day I've taken this out, I've found a new one, and some of them are very, very frustrating indeed. This is not what you'd expect of an Audi car. Now, this wasn't always owned by Audi. For a while it went into private ownership and they then bought it back. And I understand it did have a bit of a hard life while it went away, but still, it should be better than this. We also have to spare a moment to talk about the significance of the car in which you currently find me. For this is Audi's original R8 V8 press car. This is the very car that Jeremy Clarkson drove on Top Gear way back in 2007. And it even made it into the opening credits of the show for a good few years. This is automotive royalty. I've driven it before, but I'm very, very happy to be driving it again. And this week, the first of the R8s has been joined by the last of the R8s, because I've also got back on the driveway the last of line R8 GT. A very different animal indeed, and I'll be doing a video on that fairly soon, as well as a few with both cars for JayEmm and friends, including one that I'm really looking forward to, where we're going to give our buddy Will his first taste of a supercar, and it's going to be behind the wheel of this, which I think is the perfect starter supercar. Flawed though it may be, the handling is friendly, it's benign, it's a lovely thing. The brakes on this, though no doubt capable, they're also very much overly servoed. Even after a few days of driving, I'll still come into a bend and find myself putting my foot down just a bit too much. And though the brake and throttle pedal might be nicely spaced, I have had a few issues with the brake and clutch pedal. On a couple of occasions, I've gone to put the clutch down and found myself just catching the brake pedal too. And I've been driving this only in my driving shoes, my Onitsuka Tigers. Now that's a bit worrying. Insurance cost in one of these is hard to say, though by and large I wouldn't expect it to be that expensive. Tax unfortunately is, and for just about all of these, it's going to be £700 a year. Though in all honesty, if that's an amount that gets you nervous, this is not the kind of car for you. And this leads me onto the big point I want to make today. The R8 has this reputation of being the friendly, easy supercar, the nice, happy thing to live with that's really far less demanding than anything else out there. And that is almost certainly true. But that doesn't mean it's not going to cost anything to run. You see, sure, it's not necessarily on a good day going to be that much more to run than an RS4. Many of the components are shared, but here they're maybe a little bit less accessible. But the truth is, an RS4 can be a very, very expensive thing to run if it wants to be. Your regular servicing and things in here might often be only hundreds of pounds, but these are cars easily capable of throwing you bills of thousands of pounds. And now they're reaching that critical age of being near 20 years old. That is the stage at which cars tend to become a little bit more demanding. They don't tend to rust. You may get the odd bit of aluminium corrosion here or there, albeit on the R8 I don't tend to hear about it that much. What you may instead find is evidence of previous poor paintwork having been done, previous wrap or PPFs that might need removing or replacing, curbed alloys, warm brakes, tyres, all that sort of stuff. To do a full set of brakes on this could cost you anywhere from £1,000 to £2,000 up to 3 or 4. Even more if it has the carbon ceramics. And though in supercar terms these are normal numbers, for a lot of people they're numbers they might not be used to. Bushes and things will wear, the dampers will wear, and like I already mentioned, if you want to keep the car as original and it's got the mag ride, that's going to get expensive very, very quickly. Happily, the engines and gearboxes have proven to be fairly dependable. When the car was facelifted, you then got the S-tronic box as opposed to the R-tronic, that is the dual clutch box, and when that came in, the manual became very rare indeed. In fact, to find a manual facelift car is fairly rare. To find a manual facelift V8, nearly impossible. But for me, I think this is the engine that I'd want, because it's this that makes the R8 stand out. And it's still an excellent car, and one full of character. And here's the big thing. This car is about to hit the critical moment. Every car hits it, but with performance cars, it's bigger than most. You see, this is the point in time at which the R8 is about to split. And what you're going to have in 10 years' time are really good, nice cars that have been well maintained, and then really ropey, rubbish ones that are going to cost far, far more than it's worth to try and bring them up to the standard you'd like them to be in. And this is the point at which most of the cars could go either way. With a little bit more neglect, a few owners that don't realise what's required to keep these cars on the road, you can get yourself into something that's very expensive very quickly. But if you go into this eyes open, get the car inspected, and then set yourself aside a few £1,000s a year, knowing that things will need done. Hoses might be starting to perish. Things will just need the maintenance that you should do on any 20-year-old car. Well, this is the time to get yourself an R8 that you can look after, cherish, and enjoy, which will then do the same to you, and in years to come will stand out as one of the examples that people want to buy. Will you get your money back? I don't know, probably not, because there's too many of these around, and generally speaking, they've survived. However, these aren't getting any cheaper, and in 5 or 10 years' time, I think we're going to see a much bigger price differential between a bad and a good one than we currently do. So, if you've been thinking about an Audi R8, particularly this, the early V8, now I think is the time to do it. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Audi for lending me this lovely piece of motoring history, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.